Fionn MacCumhaill and the Salmon of Knowledge. Written and read by Neil Dennehy. Fado, a long time ago, before stories were written into books, there lived one of Ireland's most famous heroes, Fionn MacCumhaill. Fionn MacCumhaill. Fionn, the son of Cool. Now, as we know, often the greatest of people come through the toughest of times, and Fionn, perhaps the greatest of them all, was no different. You see, back then, Ireland was guarded by the Fianna, a band of warrior hunters sworn to protect the land and its people, answering to honour, courage, and the old laws of the earth. Cool, leader of the Fianna and chieftain of Clan Vashna, was a warrior of great renown, fierce in battle, but fair in judgment, and deeply loved by those who followed him. But power draws envy, and even the great men of the Fianna could be led astray by jealousy. Among the Fianna was another clan, Clan MacMorna, the Sons of Morna, led by the formidable Gull MacMorna, who came to believe, with others whispering in his ears of course, that he should be the one to lead the Fianna, not Cool. Once they were allies, friends even, but Gull became a rival, and ambition overcame loyalty and became betrayal. Cool fell in battle, struck down by Gull MacMorna himself. Morna, Cool's wife, was pregnant with their first child at the time, though she wasn't showing yet and had told no one. She knew only too well that Gull MacMorna would not allow any son or daughter of Cool to survive that might come back seeking revenge. With no other options, Morna, in the dark of night, with only a small ration of bread and cheese to feed her, and a long moss-green cloak to keep her warm, fled into the wild heart of the island. She crossed rivers without bridges, and walked barefoot beneath moonless skies. At last she reached the deep forests of the Slieve Bloom Mountains, shared now by the counties Laois and Offaly, but where no man lived at the time. Now I said no man lived there, but I didn't say nobody. You see, two women, who had no time for men and their games of power, had made their home together in these very woods. And these were no ordinary women. The first was Leah Lucra, the Grey Lady of Lucre, a warrior woman and a hunter of great strength and even sharper will. She had fought and hunted beside the men of the Fianna, and got the better of many of them. She feared neither blade nor beast. The second was Bomel, a druid woman, a keeper of the old knowledge. She knew the secrets of Ogham, prophecy, and the gentle magic of the land whispered only to those who could be still and listen. They gave Myrna refuge, and she stayed with them until her child, a boy, was born. But, knowing that she could not protect him from Gull MacMorna and his clan, the young mother left him in the care of Leah Lucra and Bomel until he was strong enough to protect himself. Together, these two women gave him a home and loved him as their own. In fact, it's said that when his long life was lived, he insisted that he would be laid to rest on a peak of the Slieve Bloom Mountains, not far from Mount Rath, overlooking what he always considered his home place. They named him Demna, which comes from an old Irish word for certainty, but can also mean little dear. Bomel, with her powers of prophecy, was certain that this little one was destined for greatness. Demna grew as wild, strong, and steadfast as the mountains themselves. All his time spent playing and then training in the hills, breathing rich forest air, drinking from crystal clear streams, eating wild berries, nuts, and the freshest of fish and game, nourished his body, mind, and spirit. From Leah Lucra, he learned how to survive. She taught him how to track animals from the messages they left in bent grass and disturbed earth, to throw a spear the length of a football field and split an apple in half, to run for miles over rock, mud, leaf and stream without missing a step or making a sound, and to stand his ground against wolves and boars when fear rose in his chest and his heart pounded like a drum. From Bomel, he learned a different strength. She taught him the names and ways of plants, those that healed and those that harmed. She showed him how bark, berries, roots and leaves, prepared or mixed the right way, could soothe fever, dull pain, heal a wound or bring sleep. She taught him to listen to the land itself and to know where he was and when it was, by reading the sun and the stars. Together, they taught him balance and harmony. As Demna grew, so too did his hunger for knowledge. Every answer he received brought 2 more questions to his mind, and a time came when he needed to go beyond his beloved forest home to satisfy his need to learn more about the ways of the world. Demna fell in with a band of travelling bards and poets, men and women who carried Ireland's memory through stories and song. They wandered from hall to hall, entertaining others for shelter, wisdom and food. They were always well treated, for the host knew that the song they sang in the next hall, good or bad, could be about him. They taught him the magic of words and poetry, which can change minds, hearts, and fates. The words we think, speak, and believe have great influence and should be chosen wisely. They taught him of history, bloodlines, and alliances, the rise and fall of clans. Through them, Demna began to understand the wider world that had shaped his own beginnings. He listened and he watched, as he had in the forests, to the interactions between people, attentive to what was said and what was meant. He learned manners and etiquette, how to carry and conduct himself, when to speak and when to hold his tongue, all very useful for getting on in the world of people. Now, you might be wondering how it was that Demna became known as Fionn, and you're right to wonder. Like our clothing, we wear names for a while, until they don't really fit anymore. And though he was still destined for greatness, Demna had long since outgrown Little Deer. The bards could see this, so they started to call him Fionn, meaning bright, fair, or radiant, which fit both his fair hair and features, but also his intelligence, clear mind and open spirit. It didn't take long for Fionn to learn all the bards could teach him, but still his hunger remained. There was only one who might be able to teach him more, an old man called Finegas, known by some as Finegas, the wisest druid in the land. For 7 years Finegas had lived by a beautiful, quiet spot on the River Boyne near Slane Castle in the County Meath, waiting. You see, Finegas, much like Fionn, had an unquenchable thirst for knowledge, and had dedicated his whole life to learning. They say it's a wise man that knows he knows very little, and Finegas, for all his knowledge, knew there was so much he didn't know, and that there wasn't enough time left to learn it all. But, in his travels, he had come across an ancient prophecy. It was said that the source of the Boyne River was in the other world, a pool of water in a place of magic, surrounded by 9 hazel trees that contained the world's knowledge. The water from this pool flowed into our world, through the River Boyne, and into the open sea. Only one creature could travel from the salt water of the sea once a year through the fresh river water all the way to the source in the other world, the mighty salmon. And only one salmon had lived long enough to make that journey many times, feeding on the nuts that dropped from the 9 hazel trees into the magical pool, absorbing all the knowledge they contained. This was the Salmon of Knowledge. The prophecy said that one day a man called Finn would catch and eat the salmon and have access to all there is to know about any subject. Finn Angus felt it was his destiny. And sure, who else had a right to it all? Now Finegas was wise enough to know that a salmon with so much knowledge would not be easy to catch. The open sea was far too big and dangerous for an old druid like him to go fishing, and the magical source could not be reached by any mortal. So he walked the length of the Boyne on both sides 3 times before he chose a spot. He needed the river to be narrow, shallow, slow-moving, with space on the bank for a camp and plenty of woodland to forage for food. He expected to be there for quite some time, and so he was. The clever salmon knew of every lure, line, net and trap that Finegas used to try and catch him, and could easily make his way through. When Finegas stood upright in the water, the bold salmon would swim under his legs, and when he crouched down, the cunning fish would jump over his shoulder, slapping his face with a cold, scaly tail as he passed. Finegas was often soaked from diving after the salmon, always missing him by a hair's breadth. When Fionn arrived, Finegas was tired. He'd been so focused on fishing that he hadn't really taken care of himself or his camp. Fionn's polite offer to hunt, cook and clean, in return for some share of his wisdom, sounded like a good deal, and Finegas didn't take much convincing. Truth be told, Finegas was glad to have the company of a young man with a keen intellect. 2 heads are better than 1, he thought. Maybe they would succeed together where he had failed alone. Between them they devised ingenious new methods to improve their chances of catching the salmon, with strategically placed rocks, nets, traps, and lures. And one day, at long last, despite the salmon's knowledge, or maybe because it knew of its fate and allowed it to happen, Finegas finally caught the salmon when it jumped over Fionn and straight into his hands. If he didn't know any better, he'd swear the fish winked at him as he held up the salmon in victory. Overcome with joy, he instructed Fionn to build a fire, bring out the special pan, and prepare the fish in herbs, mushrooms, and root vegetables. Most importantly, Fionn was told to cook the fish very, very carefully, and warned not to taste even a scrap. Fionn was happy to do this, as he greatly admired his teacher, and wanted him to enjoy the meal he had waited so long for. As Fionn cooked the salmon, the natural fish oils, that to this day are known to be super brain food, became hot, and some started to bubble, forming into a blister under the salmon's skin. Seeing this, and wanting the fish to look perfect for Finegas, Fionn pressed the bubble down with his right thumb, which burst and covered the tip of his thumb with boiling hot oil. Fionn did what anyone would do. He sucked his thumb, blew cold air in it, and shook it out several times until the pain eased. Then he brought the perfectly pan-fried fish, surrounded by beautifully arranged vegetables, to Finegas, who licked his lips, carved out a large tender chunk, and popped it into his mouth. He savoured the delicious flavour, chewed carefully, and then swallowed. And he waited. Aside from the lingering flavour and warm sensation in his belly, he didn't feel any different. He had another bite. Again, no change. He took a piece from the tail, then the neck, turned it over and ate from the other side. Still nothing. Of course, prophecies aren't always clear, and it didn't say where in the fish its knowledge was held. Perhaps all the fish had to be eaten to gain this knowledge. It took him most of the day, but he wouldn't give in. When the soft flesh was gone, he ate the fins, the tail, the bones, and even the head, until there was nothing left. But he still felt no wiser. Finegas wondered if it would have to be fully digested, so he slept and he waited for 3 days. Sure, he didn't have anything else to do now anyway. On the 4th day he started to feel hungry again, so he sat with Fionn for some lunch and watched the young man, knowing he was trustworthy, but feeling that something must have gone wrong. Finegas leaned forward, looked Fionn in the eye, and calmly asked him, "Are you sure you didn't eat any of the salmon before me?" "I swear on my honour I didn't." Finegas knew the fish was perfect with no parts missing when Fionn presented it to him. "Talk me through everything that happened when you prepared the fish, Fionn." Fionn recalled in great detail how he set the fire, cleaned the pan, gathered the herbs and vegetables, carefully turned the fish to cook it evenly, how it blistered and burnt his thumb, but that it was okay now because he cooled it quickly. Finegas sat back in his chair and let out a big sigh as he realized what had happened. Fionn, by sucking the oil from his thumb, had been the first to taste the Salmon of Knowledge. Fionn could be pronounced Finn in some places, and Finegas was wise enough to accept that fate was waiting for this young man to come along and fulfill the prophecy. Finegas had grown quite fond of him, and wouldn't want anyone else, other than himself of course, to gain the world's knowledge. When he explained all this to him, Fionn said, "But I don't feel any wiser, or know any more than I did a few days ago." Finegas thought for a moment. "Try putting your right thumb in your mouth, as you did before." Fionn did as asked, sat bolt upright with wide eyes as his mind opened to all the knowledge of the world. He knew the names of all things in all languages, how they worked, where they were in that moment, had been before, and were likely to be in the future. He saw the web of life, and the strands that connect all things, patterns in what appeared to be chaos, and the necessary cycles of days, months, years, centuries, and even millennia. He understood that nothing truly ends. Everything simply changes to become something new. He knew each river from source to sea, each mountain from valley to peak, each tree from root to leaf, and every bird, beast, and insect. Before a question even formed in his mind, the answer instantly became clear. He knew it all. When he removed his thumb, the knowledge faded slowly, like it does when we wake from a dream, with only slivers of memories, of words, pictures, and emotions lingering on. He described these as best he could to Finegas. From that day on, Fionn MacCumhaill carried the salmon's knowledge. By pressing his thumb to the roof of his mouth, he could access the well of knowledge within him. With focus and practice, he learned to hold on to what he needed to know afterwards, at least long enough to write it down or put it to good use. All the lessons he'd learned from his foster mothers, Leah Lucra and Bomel, The poets and bards he travelled with, the lords and ladies in the great halls, and of course Finegas himself, had prepared Fionn to be able to handle an incredible power such as this, and to use it to protect the people of Ireland, as was the sworn oath of his father, Cumhaill, and the Fianna. And so began the legend of Fionn MacCumhaill, warrior, poet, leader, who would go on to do great things. Sin scéal eile, don uair eile. That's a story for another time.